Hey everybody, welcome to another recording session of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Normally, you see a whole bunch of us here. Tonight, it's going to be me and Rob. So, everybody we've got scheduled to be on, that we have on the staff that can go on the air right now, there's other plans being made, so... tonight you get me and you get Rob, and if Rob would have said no, you would have had no show tonight. So I'm good, but I don't know if I'm good enough to do a 90-minute monologue. So if you're watching us live, if you're watching us on the Polite Society Podcast Facebook or YouTube channel, you can comment on those videos. We'll get those right away and get them up on the air. If you're watching us anywhere else, go ahead and try to comment. Sometimes we get those, sometimes we don't. If we don't get them and you want your comment on the air, slide on over to the Polite Society Podcast channel, comment again there, and we'll get those up. So, Rob, I think I'm ready to go on my end. Are we ready to go on yours?
Let's make music.
All right, here we go. Masada Youb in 5, 4, 3...
Hey gang, this is Masada Youb from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. We're recording this one on Monday, August the 7th, 2023. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show, we ask if the FOID card may finally be dead.
And we'll talk about another month of more than 1 million gun sales per month.
In one of our defensive gun use stories, an armed homeowner jumps from a second-story window as he's retreating.
We'll also see if just 2 people can do what was once done by a cast of thousands. So climb aboard.
Strap in and hang on.
Episode 671 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. All right, it's Monday night. It's just after 6 p.m. or just after 7 p.m. in the Central Time Zone. That means it's time for another edition of the Polite Society podcast. Rob, what's been up since the last time we weren't on the air last Monday? We were coming back from Detroit. What's been up with you?
Well, let's explain that. Let's see. We had quite the little Polite Society rendezvous. Paul was there, Susan, Amanda, Dana. This was for Rick Ector's event that introduced 1,400 women to their first handgun shots. I got to spend about 15 minutes with each student, 35 students overall through the weekend. We had about 50 instructors there overall from all over the central U.S. There was an informal target shooting contest with the guns that we set out for the students to use. I drew a single stack Smith & Wesson at 25 yards. I was 1.25 inches off the center of the bullseye. That got me second place. I've been working with my SIRT pistol at home. I went to the range this weekend. I was on Charles Heller's radio show out of Tucson, Arizona. How about you?
Well, since I got back, I've been trying to get caught up on everything I should have got done before I left and keep up to date on everything that I should be doing now. I've been kind of successful. Not a lot going on in the gun world for me other than doing dry practice. I did, in the non-gun world, put a hold payment, which is different than a down payment. I'm going to give you some money. You're not going to sell this thing. I'll give you the rest of the money later. I put a hold payment on a brand new motorcycle that I have been having my eyes on for a long time. I really have been looking forward to getting, and I hope to have that bike in about a week. Not going to be going away from 3 wheels, but I am going back to 2 as my in and around town bike. So just more same old for me. Let me let me get this comment up here real quick. Dana, the guy that writes our show notes, says that guy doing the grip station was a real jerk. And for those of you who don't know, the guy doing the grip station was none other than Dana Lufer. And Dana did he did a yeoman's job. There were 50 instructors. Well, at the range Rob and I were at, there were 20 instructors that were helping ladies take their first shots. There was 1, sometimes 2 guys helping them get their grip down before they went into the building. So Rob and I had contact with somewhere between several and a few dozen ladies each. And Dana had contact with a lot more of them.
Well, and unlike Dana, those students think you and I do nothing but yell at people. Dana got to speak to them in a pleasant voice, and they got to say, "Oh, I understand what you're saying."
Yeah, when we got the ladies, by the time Rob and I were down, there were 2 bays that 2 bays that were working, and there were 10 stations in each bay. And Robert and I were in the middle towards the end of the second station. So by the time they got to us, the first station had been totally filled, and there were people firing, and it was loud. And so to get any verbal communication done was a very big challenge. So
right. Ranges are bad classrooms. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely are. Let's see here. I think we're pretty caught up here. I want to talk to everybody real briefly about the Self-Defense Radio Network. We are on there. Amanda's show is on there. I Am the Target Radio. Rob's Self-Defense Gun Stories. Charlie's Riding Shotgun with Charlie is up there. It's at sdrn.us. We are working hard. Lloyd Bailey is working very hard to get the websites back up and running. There's a 3-step process, and 2 of the 3 steps have been completed. We're just waiting on Lloyd now. So it's going to be up soon. sdrn.us. Go ahead and check that out. 15 shows on the network now with more to come. Rob, let's go ahead and take our first break. Let's talk to hear about ACLDN. When we come back, I want to talk about that Illinois case. Void cards may be gone. So hang on, everybody. We'll be right back right after we hear from ACLDN.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
All right, we are back. This is the new segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Rob, this first story, the Illinois Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has finally reversed and remanded a lower court ruling in a case which could determine whether the firearm owner identification card or the FOID card requirement is constitutional. The 5-page order was unanimous with all 3 judges concurring. Speaking for the Second Amendment Foundation, Alan Gottlieb said, "Hopefully this time around we won't see the case bogged down by more procedural issues, which has allowed the court to avoid addressing the main issue at hand, which is whether the FOID card requirement actually passes constitutional muster. This case has been bouncing around for 6 years, and it is high time to move forward." Rob, I can't agree with my boss anymore. That it is time we get this thing done, get that FOID card as a piece of history.
Amen. And what's interesting, the gun control crowd has to be very, very careful. This is a new playing field that they're playing on. They, in hindsight, would have been better to lose small. Now, this ruling may say, oh, FOID cards. Yeah, aren't they a lot like gun permits? Yeah, all of them are now unconstitutional. If they press this, it'll go to the Supreme Court and get slapped down from sea to sea.
Yeah, well, press it. Illinois, press this. Appeal this.
Exactly. Right.
Let's get this in front of Thomas and Alito et al., and let's have them weigh in on it. And let me.
If we don't, do you have any comments, or should we go on?
Yeah, I do, from Robert. Let me get this one up here quick. He says, hopefully that'll get New Jersey's FID thrown out too. That's why we want this appealed. That's why we want them to take this big so they can lose big.
You got it exactly, Robert. Let's see, where else? California. Yeah. On.
All right. Next story, Rob.
Right. We continue to buy guns at more than 1 million a month. If you remember back 2019, we thought nothing of that. Okay, it dipped, but we're still, let's just say this is a new normal. More than 50 million new firearms were sold in the last 4 years. Remember that urban women and minorities are the fastest growing segments of the gun culture. About time. Welcome on board. How can we help?
Amen. One thing that's often what am I trying to say? One broad brush they try to paint gun owners with we are these redneck, racist, old, bald white guys. And I, for one, I do not care if you're a man or woman. A matter of fact, I think it's more important for ladies to be armed than it is for men to be armed until men reach an advanced age. Because all women again, I'm painting with a broad brush. Generally speaking, women are not as powerful as men and can be overpowered by men. But
let's talk about that for just a second.
Yeah.
Do you remember way back in history, there were a bunch of rapes happening in the Miami area? The Miami police chief said, "Here, we're gonna teach women how to use guns," and he announced that he was going to make that statement at a press conference. When he goes to give this statement in a public forum, there are all these women carrying their guns, like in a purse, in a shopping bag. He goes, "Yes, but not now. This wasn't what I had in mind." You and I just went through a weekend where I had a couple people who said, "Yes, I'm a gun owner, but it's been a while. Remind me how we did do this." I'd never considered what it's like trying to shoot a handgun when you have 1.5-inch nails. That's the problem. They work it out. Yeah, it is an issue for women, and some of them are scary good shots, Paul.
Not only that, some of them have wrists that are as big as 3 of my fingers. I mean,
right.
They're built small. They've got tiny little wrists. They've got, obviously, some of the ladies I helped didn't work out a lot, and so they're petite. And getting
yeah, okay, let's go there. I had a young lady who said, "I work out. It's easy to lift the gun." I go, "Ma'am, I don't think it's a matter of strength. I notice how calm you are. You're able to pay attention to what we need to do. You're doing the work, and I think it's mostly between your ears, less between your wrists."
Yeah. Well, let's face it, there is a small amount that is physical. Being able to physically squeeze that gun, being able to put a lot of force on the grip of the handgun will help with recoil. But if you get the sights
we were shooting slowly anyway, right?
Yeah. If you get the sights on target and you get the first shot placed right where you want it, the need for a second shot sometimes isn't as great. It's getting those sights on target and getting that first shot where it needs to go. Let's go ahead and go to our next one. About 40 Democrat congressmen put forward legislation to apply a 10 times tax on standard capacity magazines and firearms. They called them weapons of war. Yeah, we're going to say it. The Democrats are out to take your guns. If you want a $600 gun, well, guess what? You're going to have to pay an additional $6,000 in taxes for that gun. Rob, the two things I want to say about this. Number one, just a 2-word comment: poll tax. They can't do this.
In fact, Biden's DOJ, Biden has said, you know what? I'll do what I want. The executive agencies will follow my instructions, and you can sue me. So they can't pass the legislation. Maybe they'll do it by fiat. That's a bad idea. And what bothers me, they had this proposed before, and millions of gun owners voted for Democrats despite that. I don't understand that. Someone will have to explain it to me.
Yeah, you can't tell me that there aren't gun owners in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's district. You can't tell me there aren't gun owners in San Francisco where, what's her name?
Dianne Feinstein?
Yes, where Feinstein is from. And California, Feinstein represents all of California. California has more gun owners than any other state. Apparently, they just don't know how to vote.
Don't vote. Yeah. Let's go to Texas and take a different take on the news.
Okay.
They now require armed defense of every campus. Let's do the math. The Board of Trustees of each school district shall ensure that at least one armed security officer is present during regular school hours at each campus. The legislature gave each school district 5 different ways to comply with that mandate. A school district peace officer. That's basically where some school districts have their own cops. Think Uvalde, for example. Or a school resource officer. Schools can rent or buy an on-duty police officers as part of their regular duty assignments. They can get a commissioned police officer employed as security personnel. Think of a off-duty police officer. But again, he's been through the academy. They allow people in the school marshal program. That's someone who spent 80 hours of training with 80 hours of recurrent training every 2 years. The last one is what I think will be used a lot. School districts can hire a district employee who's completed school safety training. By law, that's 15 to 20 hours. And he is then authorized to carry a handgun by the school district. Look, a police officer costs about the same as a teacher. In contrast, we can train and license about 60 armed district employees for the same price. If you're like me, you'll think that those 60 people will be able to be a lot of places when the school resource officer would have long been gone. I mean, think of it, the playground monitors there before school, cafeteria workers there for breakfast, the coaches there after school watching teams play. And the case in Texas just proved that police have no duty to move toward the gunfire and enter a building when there's an attack taking place. You want to take the next one, Paul?
Well, let's get a comment in here fast from Michael DeWine. He says, think faster. It saves lives. That's
Michael.
kind of where Rob was going. I'm going to say this as well, in that I would much rather have a lot of Texas people getting trained, and that 15 to 20 hours by law, that's less than the FASTER program. And,
just a little bit.
And so any Texas teacher that takes the FASTER course would certainly qualify.
Would qualify.
And Texas is not all that, depending on where you're at in Texas, not all that far from Ohio, not all that far from Colorado. Some parts of Texas, not all that far from Arizona, all of which have active FASTER programs. And isn't there one, they're trying to start one in Oklahoma, I've heard?
I'm not sure which state will be next. It could be Oklahoma, Indiana, maybe Utah. So the politics in each state are very interesting.
Yeah. Let me get going to our previous story. Robert says, I didn't buy nearly 1 million guns last month. All right, maybe close.
Well, now that you say that, Robert, there were people who said that there are only a few gun owners. We just each have huge arsenals, and we traded guns back and forth a lot. There really weren't that many in the United States. In other words, they lied.
Yeah, well, Rob, I do know you cannot do in California what you can do in South Dakota. I think you can do it in Louisiana. In South Dakota, if I want to sell a gun to my cousin Jimmy comes over to my house, gives me some cash, I give him the gun. I personally would want to see Jimmy's concealed carry permit. Simply because I want to see that he's a card-carrying good guy, that he has passed a background check, but it's not required by the state. So if Jimmy buys $500,000, I buy $500,000, and we trade between us, nobody's going to know.
Nobody knows.
And let's see here. Let's get this one in here. Warsaw Patriot, people lack on actually fixing our school issue, and that's first by securing our schools. And that also brings to mind, we've all seen the video of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, of the officer who lined up, heard shots, and then immediately turned and ran the other way. What isn't evident in that video is where he's standing is not where the gunshots are coming from. They're from a building that's about 150 yards away from him, behind him, from what the shots sounded like. So even if what everybody said was a resource officer running away, he was actually running toward the sound of the guns. However, he was several buildings away. What if there were an armed teacher in that building?
Right. Hopefully one on every floor.
Yeah. In Uvalde, all those police officers stacked outside. What if there was, when this thing started happening, an armed teacher in that hallway, in one of those school rooms off that hallway? We wouldn't have had to wait for 45 minutes for somebody to act. Let's go. There's still more news out of Texas. By law, each school district or public junior college in Texas has to write and implement an emergency plan for every campus. By law, that plan has to address, quote, prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Texas school boards are going to have to address protecting their students. That off an AmmoLand story. Rob, what's your take on this?
It's fascinating. I used to think that if a school board didn't bring up the topic of protecting their students, that they were anti-gun. That's not always the case. Sometimes they go, I want to protect them. I fear that if I bring the subject up, I'm going to get thrown off the school board. And they implemented essentially a covert don't ask, don't tell policy. Well, now it's mandated. Now they have to talk about it. Now they're in the sales business, and they have to convince the Texas public that their children are worth protecting and that armed school staff is a prudent response.
I want to go a little bit off of center field on this one.
Okay.
I want to go off a little bit into left field. Rob, you and I have talked about this a million times. I know you agree with me. Elections matter, and we need to get involved in the little local elections too, the school board elections. You need to contact each person running for school board in whatever district you're in, whether or not. My kids are all grown. I've got grandkids that are in school now. My kids are all grown and out of school. Still, if you contact who's ever's running for a school board, say, do you support armed teachers? If their answer is no, your vote needs to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I understand that it's required that they have an emergency plan and that they have armed staff, but school boards can find a way to legally comply and yet really mess this up. So it's important that we ask. Politicians are as brave as the questions we ask them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let me get this comment in, going back to the school shootings. Warsaw Patriot says, all these school shootings first started by the Columbine shooting. It's been nothing but ongoing copycatters. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Or there's a thought that all these are copycatters. Some of this, they're not using the exact same tactics. What do you think, Rob?
Well, yes and no. I understand what you're saying. These narcissistic, celebrity-seeking murderers do copy each other. They study the issue. They talk to each other. And unfortunately, their behavior has changed. It used to be just, oh, they're going to go attack a classroom, we'll close the doors. Now, I think the attacks that actually occur in a classroom are less than 20%. They're attacking public assembly areas or the hallways. They want to set off a fire alarm and flood the hallway, or they're attacking before and after school, in the parking lot and near the school. So we have to get smart too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about this pistol brace rule, bud.
Right. It took less time than the FOID card in Illinois, but we've been hearing about this for a while. A 3-judge panel on the Fifth Circuit decided, finally, that the ATF's pistol brace rule is likely to be unconstitutional, and now we're going to argue about the scope of that ruling. Certainly applies in the Fifth Circuit. Certainly applies to the named plaintiffs. It depends on which organization, and SAF and Firearms Policy Coalition were both involved. I think for one of those, if you were a member on a certain date, it applies. I think for the Second Amendment Foundation, you can still join, and then the judge's ruling applies to you. But will the Biden administration appeal to the full court of the Fifth Circuit, or are they going to, again, try and boot this up to the U.S. Supreme Court? I think that as long as Judge Thomas is on the U.S. Supreme Court, the Biden Department of Justice may choose to lose small rather than roll the dice and lose the entire administrative state.
Here's my thought. There was a discussion on whether a Texas federal judge in the northern, because they kicked this back to this judge in the Northern District of Texas for him to decide what injunctions are proper. There's talk about this Northern District of Texas judge issuing a nationwide injunction. And that worries me. That worries me because if this one Northern District judge can issue a nationwide injunction, there's this conservative judge that's going to do a good thing. What about the hundreds of liberal judges that may decide they're going to write their own law and issue injunction after injunction after injunction on the other side?
You mean like judges out of Hawaii during the Trump administration?
Yes.
They let those stand, Paul. They get to have it. Can't have it both ways.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me get this one in. Warsaw Patriot has a good comment here. Rob Morse and Paul, what I'm worried about is the 7th Circuit of Illinois. The assault weapon ban needs to be struck down before January 2024. Illegal statewide registry is open. And I believe they have that registry actually opens in October. Is what is scheduled to be. You are scheduled to have the ability to register your assault weapon, and in January it has to be done. So yeah, believe me, SAF is working on that particular case, and I'm hoping that it is decided before October, let alone January.
Or at least we get a temporary injunction. I get it.
Yes.
And you would think, hey, Judge, you're telling people that they become felons unless they register. We think that's unconstitutional. Let's put a stay on this.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Not just the Second Amendment, but also, I believe it's the Fifth Amendment that is
right.
You cannot be forced to incriminate yourself. So Warsaw Patriot, speaking of that, said Sheriff's Association announced they will not enforce it, as well as a majority of police. Well, a majority of police, yes, but you're going to find a whole lot of yes men somewhere.
Right.
One more.
Warsaw Patriot. Rob. No, I just pull it up. As a super soaker. I like that, Dana. Warsaw Patriot, my concern is that it will be applied to political enemies of the Democrat state.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, any Republican who has ever run for office in Illinois and has posed for a picture holding an AR-15 is in extreme danger, even if that AR-15 wasn't theirs.
I'm drawing analogies here. There was a law in New Jersey, fortunately fixed by the Attorney General, that said unless your firearm had a serial number issued by a federally licensed manufacturer, it was a ghost gun and it was against the law for you to have it. You're now a felon. New Jersey regulated BB guns as guns, so your Daisy rifle, even if it had a serial number on it, was never manufactured by a federally licensed manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
So they needed to say, whoops, the legislature did a stupid, this is how we're going to interpret it. And is that where we're going in the weeds to protect honest citizens in Illinois? I don't know.
They also just made that in New Jersey made, until it was fixed, made every pre-1968 firearm illegal.
Right. As well as all the imports.
Yeah.
Because the initial interpretation is it was serialized by a U.S. firm. What about all the Benellis that, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next story, the Fifth Circuit also ruled that a collection of gun parts was not a gun. That applies to incomplete firearms, the so-called 80% kits that let you build your own gun. The ruling was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court as being reviewed by Justice Alito. One important argument is that Congress never said that a bunch of parts is the same as a gun. That was never written into law anywhere. Lawyers from the Biden DOJ say that the conclusion is obvious. The fact that you can take the stock off your shotgun and you own a saw does not mean you own a short-barreled shotgun. A block of aluminum is not the same as a finished firearm any more than a bunch of unassembled components is the same as ammunition. That is a Cam Edwards story off Bearing Arms. This is, it would seem to you and me, Rob, to be common sense. Common sense in the Biden's DOJ is not that common.
No, common sense is what soundbite can we spin that won't be immediately offensive to the uninformed. Again, gun owners, you have to vote.
You absolutely do. And I'm going to again go off into left field here. Rob, we're coming up on what? We are 14 months from the next election, and the next presidential election is absolutely critical. If we've got Thomas that is getting up there in years, Alito's not a young man. We've got several judges on the conservative end. They're getting towards the point where they're going to want to probably retire. We need a constitutionalist. We need somebody who will get more Thomases, more Amy Coney Barrettts, more Alitos on the Supreme Court when it comes that time, and not somebody who's going to expand the court to 15, 19, 21 justices just so they can pack it on their side.
Not another Merrick Garland. What bothers me is I've had people who say they support the Second Amendment and they say, yeah, except, red flag laws and national registration and assault weapons bans, those are okay. And I look at them and say, no, they're not. No, they're not. Not with me. And you and I have to disagree as strongly as we can.
Yes, we do.
Last one out of Seattle, or do we want to jump?
I want two comments. Here real quick. First comment from Warsaw Patriot. People don't know how elections impact your own home and country. Quote, you don't know what freedom is until it's taken away from you. I love that. Now it's a classic rock song. I consider it a rock song because it's from my era. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Till it's gone.
Also, you commented, Canada just last week banned all social media news outlets in their own country. I hadn't heard that. That's scary right there.
Yeah. Fidel. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about this Seattle story, man.
This is interesting. There was a recent public survey out of Seattle. There was a wildly different answers depending on your age. Young people, they're seeing their friends die of drug overdoses. They overwhelmingly think that drugs are the major threat faced by people in that area. Older people, however, see TV stories about criminals using guns, and they think guns are a threat that are killing people. The reality is like an 80-to-1 difference. There's 80 times more people dying of drugs than get killed with a firearm. I was terribly surprised. Who knew that it's the old folks who'd be fooled by the tiny screen and the biased media?
Well, at some point, older, you have to define older in groups. I anymore am considered a older person. I'm well above the age of 50 now, so I'm what I used to think was an ancient person when I was young. I've still got reasonable control of my faculties, but I could see 20, 30 years down the road, comparing my mental state now to mental state 30 years ago. Give it another 30 years, I don't know how sharp I'm going to be.
Right.
I want to know how old is old,
Well, what makes that so funny is it's the kids that we always see with their head down in their phones. And yet here it is, the so-called adults getting all twisted by the media.
Yeah. Well, then again, though, Rob, I've always wanted to be on the cutting edge of technology. I was a podcaster you and I were both podcasting a long time ago.
Right.
Back when podcasting was still kind of getting its legs under it. I switched to video here recently. It's only been a couple of years that we've been doing this consistently on video. But there's some in my age group where If they want news, they tune in to the TV at 6 p.m. to catch, or 5:30 p.m. to catch the national news, 6 p.m. to catch the local news, and that's the news they consume.
Yeah. For if you still have your hair, that's what we used to do when we were kids. We don't. What? Yeah, that kind of does date you.
Yeah. All right. Next story. This one is a John Crump story off of Ammoland. Valley City, North Dakota. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives has revoked both FFLs belonging to a gun shop that sued the federal government over the now dead frames and receiver rule. Morehouse Enterprises in North Dakota teamed up with GOA to fight the ATF's attempt to regulate unfinished frames and receivers through bureaucratic fiat. The ATF created a final rule in response to the White House to order to ban 80% firearms that President Biden calls ghost guns. The lawsuit was the first case in the country to challenge that now vacated rule. Shortly after they filed the suit, the ATF launched an inspection of the gun shop. I'm going to make this very short. 2,700 guns the store acquired were documented. So were the 2,400 dispositions of it. Then on that March
Audit?
inspection, the ATF issued a report of violations. The ATF in all those, and going back, I think it was 4 years, the ATF found 5 policy violations, 3 of which were simple paperwork errors. First was the store forgetting to record the return of a firearm to a customer that brought the gun in for gunsmithing. Second violation was the store accidentally writing a customer's social security number in the NICS transaction number. Third was a number left off a NICS transaction number. There were 2 more serious violations. The store transferred a handgun to a Georgia resident. FFLs are not allowed to transfer handguns to residents of another state due to the different gun laws surrounding handguns. In this case, Georgia law is not stricter than North Dakota law. Second violation was allowing the customer in Georgia a concealed carry permit in place of a NICS background check, something that is allowed both in North Dakota and Georgia, but there's not reciprocity. You cannot take your Georgia permit into a North Dakota store and use it, although they are substantially similar. So what the ATF did, there were 5 violations over 4 years, and 3 of them just tiny little itty bitty ones. They revoked both FFLs belonging to the business, even though all the errors were on one FFL, none on the second one. And short of the story is, if you sue ATF, you're going to get your FFLs yanked. Period.
Yeah, they've adopted a zero tolerance policy and said these are rogue businesses giving guns to criminals. No, they're not. Remember, this is the BATFE who was running guns to the Mexican drug lords, who's now telling us we're giving guns to criminals? Baloney.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just one more on a myriad of stories that tells me the ATF needs to be disbanded. Look, when you fill out your 4473, the ATF doesn't check it. The FBI does. There's nothing the ATF does the FBI can't do. The FBI just needs to absorb the duties of the ATF, and everybody that has ATF on their letterhead needs to be in the unemployment line tomorrow. Do
we want to do the next story, or we're going to jump to DGUs?
Yeah, let's talk about North Carolina's story, and then after that we'll go ahead and do DGUs.
If the ATF is a bad news story, this is a good news story. Grassroots North Carolina and Gun Owners of America By the way, GOA was at the Detroit Women's Training Weekend.
And bought us all
GOA
dinner at the end of it.
They did that too. GOA had previously filed suit against Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden. That was over his attempts to slow walk the issuance of concealed handgun permits to lawful residents of the state. The judge agreed that the statute is being applied unconstitutionally. The judge, this is pretty poignant, suggested that the sheriff is likely to see personal repercussions for his actions. Watch what happened. Although the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department was dismissed as a defendant, Sheriff McFadden, on the other hand, remains a defendant. Personally. Mm-hmm. Now the case will move on to the discovery phase.
This person that is currently occupying the sheriff's office in Mecklenburg County is so conceited, is so full of himself, that I expect he's going to continue on, and when it's decided that he's in the wrong, will continue doing what he's doing until a judge says, look, you obviously have not been listening. We're going to step in. We're going to do your job for you. We're going to send somebody in there. I believe it's called a special master, something like that, Rob.
Right. Yep.
And we're gonna issue these for you. That's what it's going to take for anybody in Charlotte to get a concealed carry permit in less than a year and a half.
Well, this sheriff took Bloomberg bucks. It was clear right from the start. Gun owners in Mecklenburg County didn't come over and make sure he was not elected. Guys, you were asleep. You earned this. I wish it were simpler than that. Please, if I'm wrong, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear from anybody who is in Mecklenburg County in the Charlotte area of North Carolina. If you're watching us live, throw a comment in. I'll get your comment on the air, I promise. Let's go ahead and step aside to break. We're going to hear from the complete combatant. When we come back, we've got our defensive gun use stories. Hang on, everybody. Right back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
All right, we are back. This is the defensive gun use segment of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundations. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are, both Rob and I are trainers, but this is not formal training. Neither really was what we were doing in Detroit, but you do need formal training. The defensive gun use segment is intended as information only, not as training. As always, the opinions of both Rob and I are only our own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Rob, you want to take our first one?
We're headed to Las Vegas. A man was at home on a Thursday night, 9 p.m., and hears a crashing sound at his front door. 3 men are breaking into his apartment. Fortunately, our homeowner's armed. He shot his attackers and retreated to his bedroom. Then the story takes a change for the weird. The defender jumped out of his second-story bedroom window. Hopefully, there was a roof that got him closer to the ground. News reports don't mention what happened to his firearm as he took the plunge. Police responded to the reports of gunshots and to a wounded robber who shows up at a nearby gas station saying, "I don't know how I got shot." Police followed the trail of blood back to the apartment. The police found a second robber lying in the apartment elevator. EMTs took that robber to the hospital. Finally, the police find the defender lying on the sidewalk where he's injured from his fall. He tells police what happened. It looks like the third robber got away. The second robber, the one in the elevator, he died.
Great tragedy there.
Wow. But 3-on-1 through a door, if you think I've got a gun locked in the safe way back in the... That's a long way to go.
It is. Yeah, good on the guy for pants on, gun on, having at least a gun within reach when they started coming through the door. Good on the guy for 2 hits on target at least. I'm wondering that this had to be a very dynamic entry. Possibly he was retreating as he was firing and decided that the window was a good option. I gotta, again, I'm with you, man. Weird. Why, if you're in the act of defending, why take that leap? I don't know.
None of the story mentioned whether the attackers were armed with firearms. They may have been armed with knives. I'm still thinking I would rather back away from my doorway and, okay, they came through one fatal funnel. I wasn't prepared. I am now. Now that I got to get through my door, I think I'd take those odds. How about you?
Yeah, I'm. As somebody I revealed earlier in the show, I'm north of 50. I'm not taking a jump from a second-story window. The Glock is getting emptied, the backup gun is getting emptied, the AR is getting emptied, and the shotgun is getting emptied before I consider taking that leap. That's just not going to happen.
Okay.
Let's
You're
go
up
ahead.
next.
Let's go up to from Las Vegas. Let's go to Cassopolis, Michigan. An armed citizen walked into a convenience store just before 10 at night. He was standing between the aisles when he heard a store clerk cry out. There was a robber wearing a ski mask standing behind the checkout counter. The robber was holding the clerk at knife point and threatening the clerk. This armed citizen had his Michigan concealed pistol license and was carrying concealed. He presented his handgun and shot the attacker several times. He kept shooting until the robber dropped his knife and fell down. The clerk called 911 and asked for help. The defender kept his firearm at low ready until the clerk said the police were nearby. The defender and the store clerk gave a statement. Police handcuffed and searched the robber. They found the robber's car parked behind the store, and there was a woman, Reed getaway driver, sitting in the car. Officers searched the car and the suspect. She was arrested for, guess what, possession of methamphetamine and for outstanding drug warrants. The robber was taken to the hospital for treatment, and the armed offender, thankfully, was not charged with a crime. Rob, I've taken several training courses where you have to make that hostage shot. I'm sure you've taken courses and practice making that hostage shot. Under a high-stress environment, those are not easy to make at all.
Well, and you may want to move so that the clerk is not directly behind the attacker, because now you're hoping that bullets don't penetrate. There's something else, Paul. Here, you're behind the bad guy. That we have this mental image that we're going to say, "Stop! Don't move," and the guy will turn around, and you can get the clerk stabbed.
Yes.
What are you doing here? So that requires us, are we mentally prepared to shoot someone in the back without any warning?
Well, and let me, I'm going to get into a little bit of physiology here.
Okay.
If you're going to shoot somebody in the back, I wish I could show it to you on camera. Maybe no, I don't think I can. Let me try turning a little bit here. And can I get, yeah, kind of I can. If you want to shoot somebody in the back, I'm going to go a little higher. And I'm going to put that punch right about there.
Right. You're going to... I had another DGU where a guy breaks into a house, he's shot, he runs away, they drive him to the hospital, or he later succumbs. But that means he was alive for 10, 15 minutes and could have killed the person he was beating up. A guy with a knife, you need to stop him in fractions of a second.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, you need to, Masada, you would say you need to throw that switch. You need to turn his lights out right now.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to make sure that whatever effort you make, it stops his actions immediately, especially if he's within striking distance of this clerk and he's got a knife and he's threatening the clerk. Look, another one of Masada Youb's is, can you articulate? I think somebody wearing a ski mask behind the counter where he's not supposed to be, holding a knife, threatening a clerk, there's a whole lot of articulation there.
Yep.
Now it's just time to do what you've been trained to do and do it in the most effective way you can, and good on this guy for doing it.
Right. Yep. But again, Paul, you didn't know that. You didn't have that conviction. You didn't have that settled peace of mind. Oh, if I see that, I know exactly what to do. There's no discussion. How many years was that after you got your carry permit? It took a while, didn't it?
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
After I became a gun owner, yes. It took, really, it took my first professional training, which was Kathy Jackson coming up here.
Okay.
But I had been shooting. I'd been shooting for quite a while before I started forming that mental picture, and when it solidified was when I took my first Mag 40 class, right. And then I knew if I could make that kind of a difference in this kind of a situation, I certainly would, and I practiced for it. Let me. I'm going to give Warsaw Patriot, if you would, please. Let me get this comment up so that people kind of know what I'm talking about. Warsaw Patriot says, Paul, crazy idea. It would be really cool if you got a hold of Rob Giltaka up in Canada from CCFR, Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, and talk on the issue both sides of our country's firearm laws. You know, back in the very early Polite Society podcast days, and it may have even been back when we were Politics and Guns, I did occasionally grab people from north of the border and get them on. I'm not opposed to that at all. We are United States based, but we have brethren up in Canada. I would certainly welcome that. Warsaw Patriot, if you could write a email introducing us, that would be a great help to me. My email address is paul@politicsandguns.com. If you could introduce us, I would be more than happy to have that person either on the Bullet or on Polite Society, the show we're doing tonight. Rob, let's go ahead and let's take our final break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about media and we'll shut the show down. We're going to hear from JPFO. We'll be right back right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
All right, we are back. This is the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Rob, this is where we normally talk about what we've been doing with our media. What have you been doing with the Slowfax blog, man?
Well, I'm still processing what I learned when I was out in Colorado. That was a faster class. I wrote an article, Armed School Staff and School Resources, School Resource Officers, the Quality of Quantity to Defend Our Students. We talked about some of the issues when we were mentioning the recent laws in Texas. I also wrote an article describing what happened in Detroit, Women's Armed Defense Weekend in Detroit 2023. I was struck by how similar some of the training is for school defenders with us. Not identical. It's obviously different in some dimensions. But we often ask the question, should I stay or should I go? Do I defend my room? Do I hold up? Do I have other people that defend? I think there's a lot we can learn from the similarities. That's, should we stay or should we go? My articles are up at Clash Daily and at my Slowfax blog.
I just put the link for that story, Should I Stay or Should I Go? That is in the chat in both Facebook and YouTube.
Thank you.
I had Rob on a week and a half ago on the Bullet to talk about that story. And I go get that story, read that story. It's very well written and got some great points in it. I do want to have everybody also go look at John's blog, onlygunsandmoney.com. I haven't seen him put anything up today, certainly, but I do know he's been working on his blog. And if you want to know what's going on with the NRA, that's the first blog to check. Let me see here. Warsaw Patriot wants to know my email. Paul at, all one word, politicsandguns.com, and that's the and is spelled out, and that's the email address for me. And he says, I have no connection to Rob. It would be amazing if you could contact him. I will do that once I get your email, Warsaw Patriot. I will do that. What have I been doing with media? Honestly, you've been seeing it. It's everything I'm doing in media has been on Polite Society Podcast, Facebook, and YouTube, and I'm setting up for the broadcast for Gun Rights Policy Conference. Part of that was a test stream I did when we were in Detroit. I did some test streams to see if I could, and I can, from my phone only, without the big setup here. I was able to go out on multiple streams, multiple places with just my phone. I'm going to try doing some of that when we're at GRPC and AmCon, just grabbing individual people saying, hey, let's go talk for 5 minutes, and putting that on the air. So there's going to be so much going out over GRPC weekend. I also want to invite everybody, if you're in Second Amendment media, you need to get to AmCon. That's on Friday night, GRPC week. If you are involved in gun rights in any way, you need to be at GRPC. Go to saf.org/GRPC to get the info on that. It's in Phoenix this year. Rob's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Anybody that is in the Second Amendment world fighting for our rights is going to be there. And the beautiful thing is, if they're not up on stage speaking, which many of them do, I'm not this year because of my choice. I have pleaded not to speak. But if they're not on stage, you can walk right up to them, talk to them, pick their brain, find out what they think about what situation you're going through in your home state, and they might give you solutions to what you can do in your home state, or maybe even help you do it. So, get there, get to GRPC, saf.org/GRPC. Rob, I think
45 days away now?
Yeah, we're getting right up there. It is, let me pull a calendar here. we're like 6 weeks. I've got it. Matter of fact, I've got to get a list of all the components I have here that are going to be shipped down. I've got to get that in within the next week. So, yeah. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight, I believe. Do please, if you're on Facebook, search for Polite Society Podcast listeners as a group on Facebook. I don't get in there as nearly as often as I'd like, but it is a moderated group. Some of our listeners moderate it. All of the broadcasts for PSP and the Bullet go live there as well. And a lot of stories get published, get copied in there. Some of what I talk about on the air, I find from people posting in there. So join that if you so choose, and if you're a member of Facebook. That does wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Amy, Dana, Susan, John, Amanda, Robin, Carrie Ann, and Rob,
until next time,
stay safe,
be aware,
and we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, we are done recording. We're still live on all our outlets. Rob, we did it. We did what a cast of thousands used to do.
Paul, we've been at it a while. Thank you. It was fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it too.
I did. All right, guys, I am going to shut down the stream. I'm gonna get this turned into podcast. Hopefully, get it released in the next 30 minutes or so. And do come join us. Join me 7 p.m. the rest of the week for the Bullet, and come join us again next week 7 p.m. for Polite Society.